The Friday Rugby Preview with Stuart Cameron.
Hello and welcome to the Friday Rugby Preview, looking at the Borders clubs in action tomorrow. We are very, very deep into the league season now. National 1 done and dusted, and another week closer to knowing who's potentially going down this season and who will get that final playoff spot in the Premiership. Robin Purdie with me again, and let's have a look back at last week, and let's start with a quiz. Are you ready? A quiz for you today.
Fire on.
Just the one question. It's not a very big quiz, but last weekend there were just 6 games played, all in the Premiership. Question is, how many points were scored between the 12 teams?
Oh, an awful lot. A vast amount, probably. I would imagine, I'm no statistician, but probably the highest amount that's ever been scored in the top division on any one day, I would imagine.
And what sort of number are we talking about here?
Oh, I would say on average, probably 70 points a game, maybe 76s are 42, 420, 450 points.
Well, close. If you'd said 80 points a game, you'd be spot on. It's 480. 93 was the highest, Hawick versus Ayr, all going to the one team. The lowest was 65, and that was a win for Marr, 39 points to 26, so an average of 80 points a game. But the thing was, half of the games were very, very competitive. We always hear about the one-way traffic and all the rest of it, but half of the games were like they could have gone either way.
Yeah, that's right, and it's becoming very clear now. You know, it's kind of always been the case this season, Stuart, but is it now time that this problem, let's call it what it is, this problem needs looked at? And that is, and it's not a problem in as much as, you know, the 3 teams are at fault. Absolutely not. I've nothing but admiration for Ayr, Heriots and Watsonians, but there is now that Watsonians have really hit their straps this season, and I think they've been very, very impressive in the last few weeks, to the point that I'm not that sure it's a given that Heriots win the semi-final. I think there's a game to be played there, but they are light years, those 3, they are light years clear of everybody else now, and I include Currie in that. And going forward, nobody wants to see some of the score lines that we've seen at the weekend, you know. And there's been a lot of talk about the Hawick Ayr score line, but let's not forget that Heriots touched 60 against Kelso, and Watsonians did get 60 against Selkirk. There's a problem here for me, and it's not the fault of the 3 teams, but how do we solve this next season?
I mean, it's a conundrum, and I know that obviously there's a survey going out at the moment, but there isn't really an answer.
No, there's not, and I can't emphasise enough. It's not the fault. It's not the fault of 3 teams, and it's not the fault of the other teams either. It's just the situation that we find ourselves in. But hopefully, everybody can work together to ensure that going forward, and it might take a few seasons to sort itself out. I don't know what the solution is. You can't force teams. You know, there's no draft system. Be good if there was. I think it'd be quite exciting, but there's no draft system, and you can't force Ayr to give up some of their guys to go play for Marr and go play for Glasgow Hawks and whatever. You just can't do that. So I don't know what the solution is. All credit to those 3 clubs, but for the overall game, it's not great.
Okay, let's have a look at those games then. So Currie 43, Hawks 40. 82 minutes into the game, it was 40-38 to Hawks, which would almost, you would think, have kind of kept them in the division guaranteed. But Currie, they keep on nibbling away, and in injury time they got that elusive try, turned it round and won 43-40. So 83 points there at Millennium Park. And again, Hawks giving a lot of other teams a lot of encouragement.
Yeah, they've, as I've said plenty of times this season, Hawks have sort of been better this year than I thought they would have. More competitive. That would have been a monumental result for them through at Currie. But you're right, Currie do what Currie do, and that's to their eternal credit. They got that one over the line, and that all but cements their place in the top 4. But yeah, good couple of points there for Hawks in their quest for staying in the division.
Yeah, Currie needs 6 points, I think, to be absolutely safe, and that's assuming the other team being Selkirk, are going to win at Ayr, which will be a tough ask. But Edinburgh Accies 35, Melrose 38, Accies leading 35-12. Bit of a comeback, you could say. A second half issues again, though, for Edinburgh Accies.
Yeah, it would appear to be the case. I mean, brilliant comeback by Melrose. So, that's one side of it. The other side of it is how on earth do you find yourself shipping 35 points to Edinburgh Accies in a half a rugby, given Accies' predicament at the moment. So, at the end of the day, Melrose came away with the points, and that's a really, really good result. Accies look doomed now for me. Stuart, they needed. We said before the game they needed to win that game, and they didn't. And you're right, they've capitulated in second halves a few times this season.
And they've got 2 games left. Marr away. Marr, of course, fighting for survival as well. And Watsonians at home. In the way Watsonians' home form is at the moment, that's going to be a very tough ask indeed. They can get 41 points if they get 5 points in each, but we're talking fantasy land, really, I think. And with Kelso already, Kelso having a vastly superior points difference as well, and then Hawks only need 4 points in 3 games to send Accies down. So I think Accies look like they're going to join Musselburgh.
You mentioned the possibility of 41 points there for Accies. I think it's much, much, much more likely they'll end up with 31.
Hawick 0, Ayr 93. Full respect, though, to Sean Muir talking to Rugby Radio after the game. The Greens had absolutely no answer to the power of Ayr, who were ruthless from the start. Many Hawick boys missing, of course, through injury, but even a full-strength team would have struggled against an Ayr with this gulf, that we talk about week in, week out between the ex-Super 6 teams and the club side.
Oh, definitely. Ayr at this level are immense. They are probably the biggest team. To my mind, they're the toughest as well. They've got some of the best rugby players. It is a heady combination, and they've got many of them as well. They've not just got a few, they've got 30, probably 40 of them. So yeah, they're just in a different place at the moment. You're right, there's been a lot said about this game. I'm not going to add to what I think was too much of a pile on Hawick. Some of their own fans in the comments section that I've seen on social media, etc. I think a lot of the people that were commenting in the way that they're commenting probably haven't seen a lot of Premiership rugby this season. Hawick were always going to lose that game heavily, and that's no disrespect. You're right, they're missing so many at the moment, and guys that retired and guys that are overseas and injuries and all the rest of it. Hawick wouldn't have been a given to beat anybody at home on Saturday in the division. That's just where they are at the moment, and that's through no fault of their own. And Ayr, like I say, are a different animal. It was always going to be a cricket score. Unfortunately, that's what it turned out to be, and I agree. I think certain people within the Hawick camp, Sean Muir in particular, has been exemplary since then. What he said to us after the game and what he's since put on social media as well, all credit to the guy.
Of course, a lot of people have come up to me and said, well, how do we get the other teams up to that level? Is it a money thing? I mean, obviously, you've got to have very savvy people around the club who have got good contacts and all this kind of stuff, and investment in players and in the infrastructure. How far away are we from taking like a Hawick or any of our border sides to get up to that level consistently? What does it take? Geography
doesn't help. It absolutely doesn't. You can have all the money in the world, and you're still not going to get some of the players who want to be based in Edinburgh or they live in Glasgow or whatever, or if they're coming to these shores they want to be in those areas, Edinburgh or Glasgow. So yeah, geography, numbers, playing numbers, and just societal changes. Stuart, not as many people play rugby nowadays, and you look back at the great days of Hawick rugby, not so much recently great days, but in the past when they had however many teams out, and the YM had a seconds out and the trades had a seconds out, and those days are gone, and you can't magic the numbers up from nowhere. You're bringing kids through, they're not properly physically developed. I think in this region it's going to be a struggle to compete going forward. It pains me to say it, but I don't see what the answer is. Jed can't magic players out of thin air, and if you've not got a benefactor with millions and millions of pounds, you can't, even if you chuck loads of money at players, some are not going to come to this geographical location, like I say anyway. So I don't know what the answer is there, but looking forward to next season, I can see teams down here, unless they recruit really, really, really well, they're going to struggle next season, and it pains me to say it. Hawick, as it stands at the moment, I can see them struggling next season. Melrose, I can see them struggling next season, or I can see them, not challenging, that's for sure. Kelso look to be about the strongest for me. Selkirk are 2 or 3 injuries away from struggling For all that they've been great this season and the recruitment's been brilliant, that they're only injuries to Tate and Fisher and maybe a couple of others away from struggling. So we ain't gonna have a team winning the league anytime soon, that's for sure.
And having said all that, and I mentioned this on ITV as well, isn't it remarkable from this area to have next season, assuming Kelso stay up, 40% of the Premiership, including your Currie and your 3 ex-Super 6 teams in the Premiership. I mean, that is talking about punching above your weight. That is a remarkable achievement.
You've taken the words right out of my mouth. It's absolutely punching above our weight. That's a great achievement, and the following season, if all 4 are still in the division, then that's an even better achievement.
Absolutely. So Heriot's 59, Kelso 31, Heriot's and Finefettle at Golden Acre, but a bonus point for Kelso scoring 31 points. That was impressive. We always said that beforehand, if you can get something out of the game, then that is very, very good indeed, which they managed. Bill McLaren Shield now at Golden Acre. They'll keep that actually till next season because they don't have any home games left. But Kelso, the only team to score 30 points at Golden Acre this season, and Selkirk, with 38, scored more points against them this season than any other side, and that includes the other Super 6 teams.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point for Kelso. Yes, nobody wants to lose 59, but again, I've said lots of times this season, if you go to Heriot's, Watsonians and Ayr, and you come away with anything, 1 point, to me, doesn't matter how many you concede. If you concede 80 points and score 4 tries, on paper, it's a good outcome. To be honest, you've left there with a point. It's contributed to your standing in the division, and yeah, that's a good effort that against the league's second best team. And I think they can take a lot of heart from that going into this weekend. And whereas Heriot's march on, albeit they've got the toughest task of them all this weekend.
Musselburgh 26, Marr 39. So Accies' result and Hawk's result helped Kelso, but Musselburgh couldn't stop Marr, who are coming up on the rails really. They got revenge over Musselburgh, who beat them at Fullerton Park earlier in the season. And while Musselburgh are the first of the 3 to get relegated, Marr still have 4 games to go. They're all at home, so they certainly have a chance of catching Hawks or Kelso. Marr can get 49 points if they do a Boroughmuir and they get 5 points from each game. But it's Accies, it's Heriot's, it's Hawick and Currie. Heriot's already in the playoffs. Currie likely to be in the playoffs. It could be a dead rubber. They'll not be risking their best players or wanting to risk their best players for that game. So we've seen this before. The end of season results can be rather bizarre.
Yeah, they can be. And Marr have got a chance. They absolutely have got a chance. It looks like they're quite a long way behind or quite a long way off safety. But as you mentioned, they've got 2 games in hand and all of their remaining games are at home. Now, I look at the fixtures. Edinburgh Accies this weekend. There's 5 points there. There is, absolutely. Heriot's, depends, you're right, who they send over already with their playoff berth secured. Hawick, current Hawick predicament, there's 5 points there for Marr, potentially. And Currie, you're right, Currie in the playoffs for me, they will be by that point in time. Who knows who they might send over? And don't get me wrong, Heriot's and Currie shouldn't care less about what's happening at the bottom of the table. They look out for number 1, and if they end up sending reduced squads down there, then that's entirely their prerogative. But you're right, it can have an impact on the other teams. Marr, I've got a chance.
And of course, going back to that earlier point as well about end of season matches and deciding what your priorities are in the season. Next season, everyone is going to be trying to avoid that one drop. And so again, they're going to prioritise who they put out against Heriot's and Watsonians and stuff and concentrate on getting their best team on the park against the teams round about them.
Absolutely. You look out for number 1. Next season is going to be tough because GHA are an upwardly mobile club. They're not coming up to make up the numbers. I don't see them coming up and being a whipping boy that's come up from a league below just to disappear off the face of the earth again. They might get some guys back from other clubs that they lost when they went down, and they might have a bit of money to chuck around as well. It's going to be a dogfight next season. Yes, there's only 1 down as opposed to 3 down, but Musselburgh are not in the division to potentially get 10 points from, and Edinburgh Accies are potentially not going to be in the division to be able to pick up points from, and Marr or Glasgow Hawks potentially, where you've got potential points, they're gone. 3 of those easier teams to play against are gone and going to be replaced by somebody that might not be that easy to play against. So there's going to be a few teams with a bit to think about next season, albeit there's only 1 down.
Well, the other game, Watsonians 60, Selkirk 26, and again, same rule applies. Selkirk getting that bonus point, going out there to achieve at least a point from that game. Watsonians 31-0 up in the first half, though. Selkirk won the second half, got that try bonus, as I said, but that gap between them and Currie now 9 points. Currie need obviously just 6 points from their remaining 3 games to get into the playoffs. They're all away from home, but one of them is at Hawick next Friday, and of course Selkirk would need to win at Ayr to try and close that gap. So the card's well and truly in Currie's favour.
Oh, definitely. Currie are nailed on now for looking at the fixture list, like you say. Mathematically it's not certain, but for me they're off the board in terms of qualifying in that 4th place. Selkirk, again, like Kelso, I believe Selkirk were pretty unhappy with the way that they performed, but they came away with that bonus point, and to me that's about as good as you can hope for. 1 or 2 bonus points when you go to either of these 3 grounds, Watsonians, Heriots or Ayr. But Watsonians are an interesting one for me. They've really hit their straps. They're coming up the rail now, putting on some big scores, look like they're playing some good rugby. And if you'd asked me a month ago, I'd have said cancel the playoff semi-finals. It doesn't matter who's in the playoff final, the semis. It's an Ayr v Heriots final. It's an Ayr v somebody final now for me. I'm not entirely sure who.
Cancel the playoff semi-finals. I'd cancel the final as well.
Well, no.
But let's not go there today.
Down that road. But no, Watsonian, fair play to them. I've said a lot of times this season that Ayr and Heriots are miles above anybody, but Watsonians now are getting themselves into that conversation.
Well, let's have a look at this Premiership table then, and as we predicted, both Ayr and Heriots heading for the 100 mark. Ayr 96, Heriots 91, Watsonians 76, Currie 64, Selkirk 55, Melrose 50, Hawick 45, Kelso 41, Glasgow Hawks 38, Edinburgh 31, Marr 29, and Musselburgh 16. So that's the way the Premiership table looks like. Let's have a look at tomorrow's games then, starting with Ayr against Heriots. The 2 teams likely on form to contest the final, whenever that may be, with Silver Saturday now announced as the 19th. Let's assume the semis will be on the 26th, with the final in the first Saturday in May. That's not confirmed, but it certainly would look that way. Even if Heriots win tomorrow, it's out of their hands, with Ayr needing to beat Selkirk at home to get enough points. So not so much at stake really, with the top of the table getting the home tie against the 4th place team, and the 2nd place will be at home to Watsonians. Hugh Brown going to Milbrae to cover this. So it's obviously not as important as if the 2 of them are in the final, but it's still an intriguing contest, because Heriots will want to get revenge from their loss at Golden Acre.
They will, absolutely. They will. It's a wee bit of a shame, this one, because I think we all, a few weeks ago, had our hopes pinned on this being, almost some kind of playoff for the, top of the league playoff, home semi, guaranteed, and probably home final guaranteed as well. Yeah, there's not as much riding on it, but yeah, Heriots will want to lay down a marker for the rest of the season. If they can go down there and win, then that makes them cock a hoop, and it gives Ayr something to think about. Can I see it happening, however? I can't. I can see it being a decent game. I can see it being the highest quality game of the season, but I can't see anything other than an Ayr win. Wouldn't at all be surprised if Heriots come away with something.
Glasgow Hawks will play Watsonians. Important match for both teams, of course, because Watsonians can still actually be caught by Currie for that 3rd place, which is something I didn't actually think about, but that is actually a possibility. And Hawks, of course, still looking to get points to avoid relegation.
Yeah, Hawks could do with getting something from this just to ease their worries a wee bit, and Watsonians we've spoken about are absolutely riding high. I can see a Watsonians win. Stuart Hawks potentially will have a few academy guys, maybe even full pros, but yeah, Watsonians have too much there for me, and they will cement their place in 3rd.
Kelso versus Currie, that's our commentary game tomorrow at Poynter Park. Kelso looking to do what they did last season against Currie and beat them at Poynter Park. Let's hear from Kelso, Director of Rugby, and that's Neil Hinnigan.
A few weeks ago we were up there, we lost 5-2. We let Currie get a really easy foothold out of the game, and they scored 3 tries in the first 15 minutes, and that left us with a bit much to do up there. So this time around we're going to have to be on it early doors. We're going to have to come out ourselves, out the traps, and try and get a foothold in the game and take it from there. We obviously still badly need points to secure our position in the league, so the players know what's at stake. There is a couple guys missing. Keith Melbourne's unavailable, Ashton Asante is also unavailable, and Jack Utterson is playing for the under-18s on Sunday. So 3 are players that are important there, but there is a couple of youngsters getting a really good chance here. So, they're quite exciting, and they've been on the peripherals of the squad most of the season. So Mackenzie Shaw and Sam Wood get the chance to step up. So it's really encouraging to see that. We welcome back Ewan Knox and Adam Hall into the squad from last weekend. 2 or 3 changes, but the focus remains the same. Our goal is to get as many points as we can in the next 2 games and hope that that's enough.
Well, out of the 2 home games left for Kelso, Glasgow Hawks being the last one, this obviously, you would think on paper, is the toughest of them all, but they'll certainly be going out there and buoyed by Glasgow Hawks' result last week, will be targeting a win.
Yeah, I think so. And they had a wonderful win last season against Currie when they were on the march for 4th. Like that day, it'll be a big and hostile crowd, I would imagine. It's going to be a tough game. There's no 2 ways about it. If Melbourne is not available now, it's been said that Melbourne's not available.
He insists this week that he's injured for the rest of the season.
Right. Well,
but we've heard this before from Mr. Hinnigan, haven't we?
Yeah, that is a blow. There's no 2 ways about it. He's a big lump of a boy, and you need your big lumps against a team like Currie. So that doesn't help the cause. But yeah, Kelso can win this game. Kelso buoyed by the tries that they scored at Heriot's, and you're right, buoyed potentially by Currie struggling to beat Glasgow Hawks at home. So, but I think for me, if Kelso can come away with anything, again, pretty good result. 2 points would be handy with that game against Hawks at home the following week in mind.
Marr against Edinburgh Accies. If there ever was a crunch match with so much at stake, this is the one. But simply put, if Accies don't win this, they're down. Marr, though, can still save themselves with a home win and keep their comeback alive. So, as you mentioned earlier, you think there's 5 points there?
I do. Accies have been really struggling, and last weekend can't have helped. Strong winning position, and they blew it. Marr, it will be desperation stakes over there. Big crowd, partisan crowd, as partisan probably as you can get in the club game. Not an easy day out for Accies, and yeah, I wouldn't be fall down surprised if Accies came away with a win. They're 2 teams at the bottom of the table, but I do fancy Marr to take it.
Selkirk versus Musselburgh. Musselburgh already down, of course, but Selkirk need 5 points and hope that Kelso do them a favour at Poynter Park to get that 9-point gap down to still give themselves hope as they head to Millbrae next week for their last game of the season. We hear from head coach of Selkirk, Sesh Henderson.
Bit disappointed last week on our first half performance up at Watsons. That wasn't really a true reflection on how we played over the season, and we came back. Okay, we won the second half. We dug deep, but again, look, we've talked about it last night as a leadership group, and we want to put that to bed and move on really quickly. And we prepared really well last night, and just before we go into tomorrow night's training, just to put in a massive performance in the last home game against Musselburgh. We weren't happy about certain aspects from the last time we played Musselburgh, so we want to put that right and don't give them easy ends as we did the last game. But just focus on what we've got to do to make sure we come away with ultimately a good win, and so it'll be the last home league game of the season. So boys are pretty focused on that now. Squad wise, pretty much the same squad. It's just still got James Bett out injured. There's going to be an opportunity for Finlay Smith, who's come up from the youth team, to take his place on the bench and make his first 15 debut in the back 5 at some point during the game on Saturday.
Sesh Henderson. So a blip last week for them defensively.
Selkirk been very good this season. They're the main team for me that have defied pre-season predictions. Been so impressed with them the times that I've seen them this season. Musselburgh already relegated, of course, not a lot to play for other than pride, but that's one thing they have got, and they've got it in spades. So it's not a given for Selkirk, but yes, I do fancy them to come away with a victory, and I imagine it'll be bonus point victory at that.
The other match, Melrose versus Hawick. We obviously know what happened last week. A big comeback for Melrose, but they were trailing. They had a bad first half, and Hawick losing heavily at home to Ayr. Let's see what the head coaches have to say about this one, starting with Graham Hogg from Hawick.
I think it's safe to say that there's been a lot of things said, a lot of things written about the result last week against Ayr. I think as head coach of the group, I take sole responsibility for how the boys went out there and how we played at the weekend. I think we all know it wasn't acceptable, and to get beat in the manner that we did at Mansfield Park hurts. That's probably an understatement of the year. It hurts a fair bit. But that's a great thing about our game. We've got an opportunity this week to move on. Probably couldn't come at a better time. A game live, BBC Alba, against their local rivals Melrose, away from home. I think myself and the group have never looked forward to a week as much after last Saturday. We were desperate to get back out on the training paddock. As I say, I take sole responsibility for what happened, and it's now up to me and up to Scotty to lead the group into this week and make sure that we're putting our best foot forward and we're creating energy, we're creating that buzz that we need to get back, and we need to fill the boys with as much confidence as we can. That's difficult after a result like that, but as I've just mentioned, with what's coming on the horizon this week, there's no better opportunity for us to get back and put some wrongs right from last week.
Last week, Luke ended up in a really positive result, I think, in terms of where we are in the season. It could have essentially been a dead rubber, but I think credit goes to the group of players in terms of where we are. 21-0 down after kind of 12 minutes, 35-12 down at half time. I think the way we finished the game in terms of who was also playing where, with Bruce Colvin and Connor Spence in the back row for the last 15 minutes. So, look, credit to the boys. They dug deep, scored late on and turned a 35-12 deficit round to 38-35. I think, desperation that Accies showed early on, we just never really got off the bus or out the cars in terms of the way you look at it. But credit to the squad, that's kind of where we are. We all dig in for each other, and, that's proof in the pudding, and it's great to be on that side of the scoreline for a change. We've had a couple the other way this season, so it's great to be the other way. So as you can imagine, with Bruce Colvin and Connor Spence ending in the back row, we might find Bruce Colvin in the back row from the start on Saturday. I think in terms, what you're going to get from him anyway, so there's no real concerns there. But back row is an issue. Backline, no one's actually picked up an injury, so we've got full backline in terms of what started last week, but we've also got Donald Crawford probably back fit and jumping at the bit to get some game time. He was obviously available last week, but just given where we were in the backline, he didn't make the squad. So Luke, it's definitely up to us to integrate him this week and get him game time just over these last 2 weeks, so then we can get him into the up and running for 7. So up front five will be Jack Dobby, Logan Kirk, Zen Swarzak, Angus Weir can play this week, which is great. Mac Rutherford's away to the 19th, so Mac will drop out and Angus Weir will come into the middle row with Angus Runciman. And then the hot topic essentially this week is the back row. Still got a few things to finalise and see where we are with that. And then the back line, as I said, will be very close to being the same as last week. Got a few kind of just who plays at 10, whether that's Kieran Clark, whether that's Rolly Brett or Luke Townsend's actually back available this week. So we've got a kind of a headache around kind of who plays at 10, and then we take it from there. But look, big game. We only played them a couple of weeks ago, so we're essentially due them one. But obviously we know against Hawick it's always going to be difficult, given it being a border derby, and also I think given their result last week, they'll not have taken that kindly, and we know we're probably going to get the backlash of that for the first 15-20 minutes. So it's really important that we start well, especially after the way we started last week. So we've got to stay in the fight for 20 minutes and then see where we get to after that. But the biggest thing for us is, and the same message that we speak about every week, is just being in control of our own performance and being more consistent over 80 minutes. So we've got to do that. We've got to be switched on, and boys are desperate to finish on a high. We've got 2 home games, Hawick and Musselburgh, so it'd be great just to sign off the season in terms of putting back-to-back wins together. But we know this Saturday is obviously going to be difficult. But look, boys are hugely excited and looking forward to getting back out on the pitch and playing against Hawick, especially after the Mansfield Park result a few weeks ago.
So lots to unpack from those two quotes from Graham Hogg and Scott Wight.
Yeah, there is. I probably fancy Melrose, to be honest. But of course, there's going to be a backlash from Hawick. But Hawick's squad is paper thin at the moment. It's an away game, so much will depend on Mitchell's availability as well. He got injured early last week, so he gives them plenty of go forward. That would be
Fraser Rennick as well.
Fraser Rennick, yeah. That's what Hawick are up against at the moment. They lost Mitchell early. They didn't have Fraser Rennick. Those are proven pro. They're not just Premiership operators. They are top Premiership operators. So yeah, that's where Hawick are at the moment, but they will be absolutely desperate to put on a show this weekend, and more than that, to come away with a victory. And Melrose, Al Ferry wasn't available. Talking about players that give go forward, Al Ferry wasn't available last weekend, so it'll be interesting to see if he's around this weekend. Probably the player of the last 2 months across all teams, arguably. So it's a big game for both. As I mentioned earlier, it's a two teams, along with Selkirk and potentially Kelso, that will have to do a bit of recruitment this summer, because looking at Hawick and Melrose in particular, their form in the second half of the season's been not that great going into, they're going to be safe, but going into next season, yeah, both of them will be looking to put down a marker tomorrow.
So National 1 is over. National 2 still going on with a couple of games tomorrow. A big one for Berwick as well. They're at home to the bottom of the table, Preston Lodge. Let's hear from Paul Pringle.
Final home game of the season for us in the league. We're coming off the back of what was a really good away win to Currie, where it was just really the things we've been working on in training, and this is not just in the last couple of weeks but throughout the season. It just seemed to be one of those weeks where everything clicked. Passes came off, kind of the gamble plays were all there, and just really credit to the boys. They really fronted up and put in what was a very good performance, probably one that wasn't expected out with our camp, but we had confidence in the boys. We certainly went up there targeting the game, and ultimately we got a good 5-point victory. So that's building on to this game, and probably takes a bit of the pressure off, albeit we know we still need to at least win one of these two games just to mathematically make ourselves safe. So we're not taking Preston Lodge for granted. They'll be targeting two wins as well to try and get themselves safe. So they'll come down there hungry. They are a big, strong, physical team, as we know. So yeah, we're expecting a tough encounter, but I'm expecting our boys to be up for it to try and get that victory, and then it just builds on to the following week where we've got a cup game. So in terms of team selection, we've got a couple of injury concerns. So Rory Hindhoff is definitely out. I would say Ewan Thompson will be out with an ankle injury, which is unfortunate for Ewan, but it gives him another week to rehab, especially after we've had the 3-week break. It's key to get him back for that cup game. We do have guys who are coming in. So Cam Wills played for Ewan in the Currie match and was outstanding. And then, Duncan Hardy's back from his travels, so he'll go into 12. We've got some fitness concerns around Ryan Wilson, but should he fail a fitness test, we'd expect Luke Hawborn, who's, trained really well recently, and he's had a lot of strong performances for the twos. It's probably just been a bit unfortunate for him that he's behind Ryan, who, very rarely gets injured and always performs. So if it is the worst case and Ryan's not fit, then I've every confidence that Luke will come in and do a really good job. And it'll be a fair reflection on what he's deserved with the training and performances put in for our twos. Other than that, we're largely unchanged. As I say, it's been a good week's training. We're expecting a tough encounter on Saturday, but it's one certainly we'd like to think we'll come out on the right side of.
Paul Pringle, head coach of Berwick. The other game being Newton Stewart fighting for their lives against Currie. Now, I really didn't think the likes of Berwick, Lasswade, Preston Lodge, Newton Stewart were going to be the teams fighting to avoid relegation zone. I thought they'd be fighting for promotion. 9 teams in this league, though, with 2 going down. The table at the moment, Gordonians obviously home and hosed in first place. They've just got 1 game to go, but can't be caught because Stumel have played all their matches. So 65 for Gordonians, Stumel 62, Falkirk 45, GHK 40, none of them playing this weekend. Currie have 38, Berwick 32, Lasswade have 27, and then in the relegation zone, Newton Stewart 25 and Preston Lodge 22. So still a little bit of work to be done, but Berwick certainly with their last 2 games playing the bottom club Preston Lodge and the team just below them, Lasswade, away from home next week.
Yeah, Berwick have done remarkably, in my opinion, brilliantly to find themselves in a place with 2 games to go where the destiny is in their own hands. Unbelievable result at Kirkcaldy. I don't think we've spoken about that since then. Absolutely incredible result, and it's put them in this position. A win sees them safe with a game to go, and they'd have bit your hand off for that a few weeks ago. So brilliant stuff by Berwick. I expect them to pick up a win tomorrow. Thompson out being as a blow. He's proven himself in the Premiership no less. But Duncan Hardy coming in, that's a boost. And Newton Stewart Kirkcaldy. Newton Stewart got a wee bit of a run going as well. Fancy them at home tomorrow, and that will put the cat among the pigeons. They could do one of the great Houdini acts this season, and it wouldn't now surprise me if they did.
Last Wade, I think, out of the 3 are the team in danger, so that sets up nicely their home match against Berwick in a couple of weeks' time. Into the East League then, and we have some fixtures still happening tomorrow, starting with Langham away at Broughton. Here's head coach of Langham, Craig Hislop.
This Saturday, it'll be no surprise to anyone that we're heading back up the road to Edinburgh. This is our 4th game in a row up in the capital city. We won the last 2. This week we play the league champions Broughton. So we're looking to finish on a high. We realistically will finish either 2nd or 3rd in the league. But it'd be good to go out on a positive, on which overall has been a decent season for the lads. Squad-wise, 19 players this weekend, so we're a few short. But fair play to the lads for the commitment on 4 back-to-back games at this part of the season. It's a bit of a joke, to be honest. Only the 1 home game since the turn of the year. So here's hoping we can go out with a bang.
Broughton are the champions, and it's both clubs' last games of the season in the league. Langham can stay ahead of Haddington, but Haddington have got 2 matches to play. Langham currently 2 points ahead of their rivals. In East League 2, Hawick Quins are at home to Pennycook. Their captain is Liam Graham.
Yeah, looking forward to welcoming Pennycook down and to finally get this game played after it was called off last minute the last time we played them. With only 4 games left of our league campaign, this is going to be our final home game, so we know it's a pretty crucial game if we want to finish 2nd in the league. Our home form this season has been relatively good. Up until that loss against Dunbar, we were undefeated, and we know that our game was to finish undefeated the whole home campaign, so it was obviously a disappointing result for us. Looking to come back and hopefully reclaim 2nd place, just depending on how results go. We know that we need to win at least a couple of our games in the run into the end of the league to try and get that 2nd place, to be in with a chance at least anyway. We know that they're going to come down with a lot to prove. They beat us away when we were up there first game of the season. But apart from that, they've had a pretty poor campaign considering their normally high standards of Pennycook. So we know that they'll be wanting to come down and prove a point to the rest of the league that they're still up there for next season. Hoping to welcome back a few other players who were unavailable for the Dunbar game due to work. And then maybe hopefully welcoming a couple of new faces into the squad. Maybe 1 or 2 from the under-18s, and hoping to get another couple of players in to hopefully even build on next season. So hopefully in the next few games we can welcome a few players into the squad that haven't been able to play up till now, so looking forward to the end of this season and to next season. We should have strong squads throughout.
Dunbar have already won the league, but Quins still have 4 games to play, would you believe, and should finish ahead of Christophin, who play their last match next week. In East League 3, champions Earlston are away at Edinburgh University Medics with a 1 o'clock kick-off. Their head coach is Cammy Hill.
Earlier game in the season we played them at home. We got a convincing win, 55 points to 7 I believe it was, or there or thereabouts. Scoreline probably doesn't reflect how the game was at home. They were a very fit and physical side. They like to run a lot, like to carry ball. When they carried ball, they carried it very hard, and they did at times throughout the game cause a little bit of difficulty for us. So going up here, you never know what sort of squad they're going to put out. You're right at the end of the season, so it'll be interesting to see. But it's another game, builds us on to next week's national semi-final for the bowl. So it's good just to get a bit of game time in the legs after a couple of weeks off. A lot of key or regular players missing, but that's maybe a bit of precaution to save some for next week. But still, we've got 23, 24 that have put their hand up for selection, made themselves available, so it'll be good for them to get a run out. At least they put themselves in the hat for next weekend.
Of course, semi-final of the National Bowl next week for Earlston at home to Hillfoot, so huge game for them as they try to make the bowl final, which is on Silver Saturday on April the 19th. Lundeen, they've got one game to play and they'll finish in second place. But that's it for this edition of the Friday Rugby Preview. We're on air at 2:30 tomorrow with commentary on Kelso v Currie in the Premiership with Robin and David Ferguson in the commentary box. Hugh Brown will be at Millbrae keeping an eye on the clash of the Titans, Ayr versus Heriot, and Ewan Swinton is at the Green Yards for Melrose against Hawick. Remember, you can listen to Rugby Radio at rugbyradio.co.uk, also from the homepage of bordersrugby.net, and our Twitter feed at Borders Scores will bring you the latest score updates. But for now, from Robin and myself, a very good night.
The Friday Rugby Preview with Stuart Cameron.